I think we actually might have just seen the worst call in the entire history of sport.
It's one thing to play dirty. It's another to play the victim after you've built an entire reputation on chaos. DiJonai Carrington, the WNBA's most controversial instigator, found herself on the receiving end of something she's rarely experienced: silence. Not from the fans, not from her critics, but from the referees. After a wild in-game collision that would have sent any other player straight to the foul line, Carrington looked up, waited for the whistle, and got nothing. That's when everything unraveled. Her frustration boiled over, her mask of control cracked, and the internet watched in disbelief as the woman who once jabbed Caitlin Clark in the eye and got away with it finally didn't. But this wasn't just a missed call, it was a mirror. And for the first time, Carrington didn't like the reflection. Because when the refs ignored her, so did the league, and so did the fans.
DiJonai Carrington committing a flagrant foul. DiJonai Carrington got flagrantly fouled.
DiJonai Carrington has always been a spark plug on the court, intense, emotional, and unrelenting. But during a heated matchup that was already teetering on chaos, she crossed a line. It wasn't just her play style that turned heads, it was her reaction when things didn't go her way. With the game winding down and tensions running high, Carrington found herself locked in a fast-paced sequence near the baseline. A scuffle for a rebound turned into a full-body collision that left her on the floor, looking stunned. She popped up quickly, arms raised, eyes wide, expecting, demanding, pleading for the referee's whistle. But it never came. The silence was deafening for someone like Carrington, who's been whistled for far less, and yet somehow also avoided. Consequences for far worse. It was the kind of moment that can break composure. And that's exactly what happened. She snapped. Not in a subtle way, not in a brush it off, that's part of the game kind of way. Carrington erupted, pacing, yelling, throwing her hands in disbelief. You could almost read her lips as she turned to the sideline, mouth agape, asking, "Are you serious?" Her teammates tried to corral her. The coaches stepped in, but the moment had already spilled over. The broadcast cameras zoomed in just in time to catch the fire in her eyes and the raw frustration etched across her face. And while players getting emotional over bad calls is nothing new in sports, this felt different.
Doesn't matter how many times DiJonai Carrington wants to get on her social media and want to claim that she's the victim and that she's not a dirty player. The league has rescinded fouls. Yeah, the league's rescinding flagrant fouls on you because it's run by a bunch of cowards.
This was Carrington unraveling in real time. The same player who had poked Caitlin Clark in the face, slammed into opponents without remorse, and often walked away unpunished, now couldn't even get a foul call when she was genuinely fouled. It was Poetic. And for fans who had followed her growing list of incidents, it felt like justice in motion. But here's the twist. Carrington's rage didn't spark sympathy. It sparked celebration. The crowd didn't gasp. They grinned. Online, fans weren't rushing to her defense. They were firing off memes. Comments like, "Now you know how Caitlin feels," and "Karma's got a jumper" flooded social media. And what might have once been a galvanizing moment for a star player drawing support from teammates, fans, and commentators into a full-blown reminder of just how far Carrington's reputation had fallen. She wasn't just a player having a bad night, she was a player being forced to confront the consequences of her own image. The irony was brutal. For once, the refs stayed quiet, and so did everyone else. And that silence spoke louder than any whistle ever could. Because in that moment, it wasn't just about a missed call, it was about what happens when you've burned too many bridges to ask for help.
Look, at this point, DiJonai Carrington should have been suspended, fined multiple times over.
By the time DiJonai Carrington hit the floor and turned toward the officials with disbelief. It wasn't just a single play under scrutiny, it was the culmination of an entire season's worth of controversy. The WNBA community didn't view Carrington as an unfortunate victim of bad officiating. They saw a player whose actions had finally caught up to her. This wasn't a one-off missed call. This was karma showing up wearing stripes. Carrington's single quotes as reputation didn't form overnight. It was built through months of reckless fouls, inflammatory post-game interviews, and a blatant disregard for sportsmanship. The most infamous moment, of course, was the eye poke on Caitlin Clark cheap. dangerous move caught on national television that sparked outrage across the sports world. Instead of owning up to it, Carrington doubled down. No apology, no remorse, just defiance. The league's failure to discipline her only fueled the fire. Fans watched as flagrant fouls were downgraded, incidents brushed aside, and Carrington walked away with barely a slap on the wrist. That lack of accountability created a powder keg. Every dirty foul, every elbow, every smirk after a hard hit to each one added to a growing resentment among fans and even fellow players. Carrington had become the league's unapologetic villain, and instead of shying away from it, she leaned in. Her social media presence amplified the persona. She made it clear that she wasn't going to change, no matter what the public thought. But when you play the villain, you don't get to choose when the audience turns on you. So when the refs ignored her when they actually missed a call that should have gone her way, it didn't matter that she was right. The court of public opinion had already ruled against her. There was no outcry. No one rushed to say that was unfair. Instead, fans cracked jokes, they pulled up old clips, reposted dirty plays, and reminded everyone exactly why Carrington had run out of goodwill. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense, but it felt like it. Even players who had previously been silent started speaking up. The conversation around Carrington shifted from "she's just aggressive" to "she's a danger on the court." And when someone finally gave her a taste of her own medicine, intentional or not, the general consensus was she had it coming. The sympathy tank was empty. And here's the harsh truth. In professional sports, reputation matters. It influences everything from fan reaction to referee decisions. When you spend months being the aggressor, when you consistently cross the line without consequence, people stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. They stop listening. They stop caring. Carrington wasn't just ignored by the referees. She was ignored by the league, the fans, and even her peers. That's the cost of playing dirty too long. Eventually, you're left with no one in your corner when it finally goes wrong. And that moment when you look around and realize nobody's backing you is when you understand just how far your name has fallen. As soon as DiJonai Carrington hit the hardwood and the referees swallowed their whistles, the internet lit up not with outrage, but with a strange mix of satisfaction and mockery. The reaction was immediate, merciless, and loud, instead of defending Carrington or condemning the officiating. Fans across platforms said the quiet part out loud. She got what she deserved. Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. Every corner of the basketball world exploded with clips of the play followed by comparisons of her past dirty fouls. Memes were flying. Now she knows how Caitlin feels was a recurring theme. Some fans jokingly called it the eye poke curse, finally coming full circle. One viral post featured Carrington getting flattened by Tiffany Hayes with the caption, "Ref swallowed the whistle." Don't worry, karma blew it instead. It wasn't just funny, it was a cultural moment. That's the danger of becoming a villain in a league hungry for heroes. While Caitlin Clark has become the darling of WNBA, fans poised, respectful, and resilient, Carrington has been cast as her polar opposite. And in an era where the internet shapes public narratives in real time, the backlash isn't slow or forgiving. It's sharp, emotional, and permanent. People weren't debating whether the call was wrong, they knew it was. The difference was, they didn't care. They remembered the elbow to Skylar Diggins. They remembered Gabby Williams rolling her ankle after Carrington invaded her landing space. They remembered the smirks, the hair pulling, the constant pushing of boundaries. This wasn't a victim on the floor. To them, it was a repeat offender finally facing what she'd been dishing out. And what made it more brutal was the contrast in how players handle adversity. When Caitlin Clark got hit with no calls, she stayed calm, kept her focus, and moved on. Carrington? She snapped. She gestured wildly, stared down officials, and launched into a performance that felt more theatrical than professional. That difference didn't go unnoticed. It widened the gap in public perception. Even sports commentators, normally reserved and diplomatic, joined the conversation. Some hinted that the league's soft response to Carrington's previous antics may have emboldened her. Others said this was bound to happen eventually. One podcast host put it bluntly, "When you make your name off disrespect, don't be shocked when nobody respects you back." And this is where things start to spiral. The internet doesn't let go easily. Once you're a trending topic for the wrong reason, Every move is scrutinized. Every play becomes content. Every misstep gets turned into a highlight. Carrington didn't just lose control on the court, she lost control of her narrative. It's rare to see such a unified fan response in the WNBA. But on this night, across rival teams and cities, the consensus was overwhelming. Poetic justice had been served. And in that viral moment, DiJonai Carrington wasn't just a player dealing with a bad call. She became the face of what happens when the crowd decides. Karma finally caught up. For most of the season, it felt like DiJonai Carrington had a protective shield around her. While other players were getting called for soft contact, Carrington was delivering elbows, crowding landing zones, and jabbing opponents without so much as a warning. The term referee favoritism started circulating for a reason, because no matter how many times she crossed the line, the officials looked the other way. That favoritism didn't just frustrate fans, it enraged them. And when it finally disappeared during this game, the moment hit like thunder. The missed call against Carrington wasn't just a mistake, it was symbolic. After months of letting her get away with antics that would earn other players suspensions, the refs finally called nothing in her favor. And it didn't feel accidental. It felt personal. This wasn't your everyday officiating slip-up. This was the system flipping on someone it once quietly protected. Let's be clear, referees are human. They make errors. But what fans noticed this time wasn't the bad call, it was the pattern break. Carrington had built a resume of chaos, and for once, it was like the officials had had enough. The same ones who once downgraded her flagrants or overlooked eye pokes now turned their backs as she lay on the floor, waiting for a whistle that never came. What happened next only confirmed the shift. Multiple angles of the play circulated online. Analysts broke it down frame by frame. Tiffany Hayes barreled in like a runaway train, and Carrington, who had actually made the right play by pulling back, was the one sent flying. It was a textbook foul, yet the call went the other way, or not at all. And just like that, Carrington became the first victim of the very officiating inconsistency she'd benefited from all year. The irony was too sharp to ignore. Fans who had begged for fairness after seeing Caitlin Clark get leveled without a whistle were now watching Carrington fall in. This time, the refs didn't come to the rescue. If anything, they leaned away. The poetic justice wasn't just in the missed call, it was in who the call was missed for. And then came the aftermath. Carrington's on-court meltdown wasn't just about frustration, it was disbelief, because she had grown so used to getting the benefit of the doubt, it shocked her when the officials didn't fall in line. She'd played with fire all season and acted untouchable. But in this moment, the flames turned inward. This wasn't just a blown call, it was a message. The referees, intentionally or not, drew a line in the sand. The WNBA's most controversial enforcer had finally hit a wall. And once that invisible protection collapsed, it raised a much bigger question. Had the league silently decided that enough was enough? Because when referees stopped giving you calls and the fans stopped giving you grace, you're not just playing the villain, you're playing alone. What happened to DiJonai Carrington wasn't just about one player's reputation catching up to her. It exposed something far deeper, a crisis of identity for the entire WNBA when a foul that blatant goes uncalled, and the public cheers instead. Of protests, you're not just dealing with a controversial athlete. You're looking at a league that's lost control of its own image. Carrington's moment wasn't isolated. It was a culmination of months of questionable officiating, favoritism, and inconsistent discipline. The problem isn't just that she didn't get the call. It's that fans didn't expect her to get it. Worse, they didn't think she deserved it. That's how far trust has eroded, not just in Carrington, but in the system itself. The WNBA is in a growth phase. Its audience is expanding, media coverage is increasing, and new stars like Caitlin Clark are bringing in fans by the millions. But that kind of growth demands credibility. You can't build a global brand if your officiating looks like it changes with the wind. Fans need to believe that outcomes are earned, not manipulated by narratives, protected players, or quiet agendas. And this moment with Carrington shattered that illusion in real time. It was a test of integrity, and the league failed it. You could feel the tension all season. Caitlin Clark getting knocked down without fouls, star players receiving wildly different treatment depending on their history or marketability. Carrington's ability to dodge consequences time and time again had become a meme. And then, in the blink of an eye, the protection disappeared. The whistle stayed silent, and the refs walked away. It didn't feel like fairness. It felt like payback. And when fairness becomes personal, officiating stops being professional. It becomes emotional. That's dangerous territory for any sport, especially one that's trying to prove it belongs on the biggest stages. And let's talk about image. Carrington may have played the role of aggressor, but the league enabled it. They allowed her behavior to fester by refusing to hold her accountable. No fines, no suspensions, no real consequences. And in doing so, they created a monster they couldn't control. Now, every time Carrington steps onto the court, the crowd isn't just watching a basketball game, they're watching a spectacle. Every shove, every scowl, every confrontation becomes content. And that might make headlines, but it doesn't. Build respect. So when she was flattened and ignored by the officials, fans didn't see a miscarriage of justice. They saw the WNBA finally getting a grip even. If it was late and messy, that's not the kind of brand identity a league wants to build, but it's the one they've earned. The bigger question is, where does it go from here? Because if a league lets a player become the villain, then punishes her in silence, it creates a toxic loop, one where drama overshadows talent, and grudges take the place of rules. And that's not a sport. That's chaos in a jersey. You can't talk about DiJonai Carrington's meltdown without bringing up the name that haunts her. Reputation, Caitlin Clark. The contrast between the two couldn't be sharper. When Carrington got flattened, because this wasn't just a missed call on a hot-headed player, it was the emotional climax of a season-long rivalry between two very different faces of the league. Caitlin Clark has been elbowed, shoved, smacked in the head, and dragged to the ground many times without a whistle. And yet, she's never lost her cool, never gone on a tirade, never demanded the world feel sorry for her. She absorbs the hits, gets up, and keeps playing. It's why fans show up in droves too. Watch her play. It's why she's become the WNBA's most powerful cultural force. Not just for what she does on the court, but how she carries herself when the game gets dirty. Carrington, on the other hand, has played the role of the disruptor, the antagonist, the player who turned aggression into a personality trait and expected applause for it. And when she poked Clark in the eye during a nationally televised game back in 2020, for without a foul, without a fine, without a word from the league, something shifted. That moment didn't just mark a low point in sportsmanship. It marked the beginning of Carrington's downfall in the eyes of millions. What made it worse, Clark's response, she didn't whine. She defended Carrington, told the media she didn't think it was intentional, and moved on. That's the moment the internet drew its battle lines. One player handled disrespect with grace, so when Carrington finally got slammed and left without a whistle, fans remembered everything. And the public judgment was swift. This is what happens when you build your brand on chaos. There's a lesson here. In the WNBA, talent will get you noticed, but character keeps you beloved. Carrington has the skill. She's physical, passionate, and aggressive, but that only works when paired with discipline and self-awareness. Without it, the same qualities that made her a standout defender become reasons people root against her. Meanwhile, Clark continues to rise, earning MVP chants, selling at arenas, and that's what makes Carrington's spiral even more glaring. She's not just losing favor, she's losing ground to a player who represents everything she's not: calm, composed, and undeniably effective. When Carrington begged the refs for a call and got nothing, it wasn't just her voice that went unheard. It was a message echoing across the league: you're not the hero here. And as Caitlin Clark keeps building her legacy, Carrington finds herself trapped by hers. The eye poke might have been a moment, but the fallout is becoming her story. In professional sports, silence is rarely neutral. It's either indifference or condemnation. And in DiJonai Carrington's case, the silence was deafening. Not just from the referees who ignored the obvious foul, not just from the commentators who chose not to defend her, but from the league, her peers, and the very fans who normally rush to social media to rally around a wronged player. This time, the usual wave of empathy never came. No hashtag justice for DJ, no think pieces, no outrage, just crickets and a few savage memes. That's what happens when a player burns through all her goodwill. Carrington wasn't just ignored, she was left alone on purpose. The fans had already made up their minds. So had the internet, and in a subtle but telling way. So had the league. Because let's be real, if this had happened to anyone else, the WNBA PR machine would have kicked into high gear. There'd be league statements, media narratives about protecting players, maybe even an apology from officials. But for Carrington, nothing. The league let the moment pass like it didn't matter. And that silence wasn't just accidental, it was a referendum on her entire brand. That's a dangerous place for any athlete to be. When a player goes down and nobody bats an E-not, the fans, not the analysts, not even the organization that's supposed to back them, that's the signal that something bigger is broken. It's not about the foul anymore. It's about the reputation that made the foul irrelevant, the most brutal part. Carrington knows it. You could see it on her face in that moment. The disbelief wasn't just about the missed call. It was about the realization that nobody was coming to her defense. No one was going to fight for her. That's what makes this moment more than just a highlight. It's a career pivot. Because when players like Caitlin Clark take hits and the league bends over backwards to protect them, and when Carrington takes one and the league shrugs, it tells you everything about how reputations are currency. Clark cashed hers in, Carrington. Hers bounced, and now she's in a strange kind of limbo. Too talented to ignore, too toxic to celebrate. She's become a polarizing figure in a league that desperately wants to present unity, professionalism, and growth. But Carrington's continued presence, soon apologetic, volatile, and now publicly humiliated, makes that harder. The WNBA has a choice: keep letting things slide and hope the controversy fades, or finally step in and define the standard. Because the fans already made theirs clear: when justice is denied and nobody cares because of who the player is, you've already lost control of the narrative. And Carrington, she's learning the hard way that the biggest punishment isn't a fine or a suspension. It's when the whistle doesn't blow and nobody misses it. For months, DiJonai Carrington embraced the villain role like it was part of her jersey. The smirks after hard fouls, the defiant tweets, the stare-downs, the eye poke that went viral, none of it was accidental. It was all part of the persona. In a league searching for identity and spotlight, Carrington positioned herself as the disruptor, the unapologetic enforcer who played with edge and didn't care what anyone thought. But what she's now realizing is that being the villain works until the story turns against you. Villains make headlines, they draw attention, they get booed, which still means people are watching. But when that energy stops coming, when fans stop booing and start ignoring, the entire dynamic shifts. And that's exactly where Carrington stands now. Not as the thrilling antagonist in a league drama, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when shock value outpaces substance. Because while Carrington was busy fueling rivalries and leaning into chaos, players like Caitlin Clark were building legacies. They were earning trust, earning love, earning benefit of the doubt. And when the league had a chance to intervene to check Carrington's reckless playstyle before it became a problem, they stayed quiet. That silence sent a message. Go ahead, be the heel, be the storm. We'll watch, but storms don't last forever. The problem with being the villain is you rarely get a redemption arc. There's no moment where the crowd turns and says, actually, we were wrong about you. You have to earn that kind of turnaround, and right now, Carrington isn't just losing support, she's losing control. Every time she steps on the court, the narrative isn't about her stats or her growth as a player. It's about what she'll do next, who she'll hit, what chaos will follow. She's no longer an athlete in the spotlight. She's a walking controversy waiting for the next headline. And that's bad for business, for herself, for the league, for everyone. Carrington's talents aren't the issue. She's an elite defender, a physical competitor, and someone with the tools to be a long-term contributor. But those talents have been buried under a mountain of bad headlines and burned bridges. And now, when she actually needs the league's support after a foul that should have gone in her favorites, not there, because the WNBA can't afford to be seen defending a player who's become synonymous with chaos. That's the danger of building your brand on conflict. When the day comes that you need help, no one rushes to your side. The applause stops, the lights fade, and you're left with the silence you created. DiJonai Carrington didn't just get flattened during that play, she got exposed. Not for being weak, but for being vulnerable in a system that no longer backs her. This wasn't just a missed call. It was a turning point, and now, the villain has no one left to fight but herself. DiJonai Carrington's collapse wasn't just physical light, was symbolic. For a player who built her image on fearlessness, attitude, and raw aggression, this moment exposed the cost of never drawing the line. When the referees ignored her, the fans cheered. When the foul went uncalled, the league stayed silent. And when she looked around for someone to defend her, no one stepped up. That's what happens when your brand becomes bigger than your game hand, not in a good way. This wasn't just a bad call in a regular season game. It was a reckoning, a sign that even in a league desperate for attention, there are limits. That when you burn every bridge, even justice doesn't come looking for you. Meanwhile, players like Caitlin Clark continue to rise not just because they're great, but because they've earned trust, grace, and respect. The WNBA is growing, and with that growth comes responsibility to enforce fairness, protect all players, and draw a hard line between competitive edge and reckless behavior. Carrington's story is a warning. Charisma and controversy might get you clicks, but when the whistle stops blowing, all that's left is who you really are and right. Now, that silence is louder than ever.